How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Blue Shifting, and welcome back to Higurashi When They Cry, Chapter 3. Yeah, Satoko didn't show up at school. Oishi got really, like, aggressive. Surprisingly aggressive. And I guess, he's been kind of denoted as Oishi's, like, herald or messenger. I guess whenever he gets involved, it seems like he tends to get close to whoever is about to become the next victim. You could look at that as him being good at recognizing patterns and trying to intervene. Or you could also see that maybe the cult or the group, whoever is like doing the targeting, pays attention to whom he's trying to get close to and might get information from, and then expedite their a plan to take them out. So the fact that he's asking for Satoko is not good. And I think we're going to have to see what happens next. Apparently, we're getting spicy already, even though Watanagashi hasn't quite got here yet. But that's... Why would that stop terrible things from happening, huh? So, this is interesting because so far, Keiichi is a lot more on board the side of the Hinamizawa people so far. I don't know if he'll be turned against them, but... At this point, we count Rena and Mion as allies rather than antagonists or anything like that. So, yeah. Let's see how it all goes. I think today's the day where things are going to really take a turn. So, buckle up. Let's go. I wholeheartedly... Yeah.
誰よりも強いはずだった。優しさから生まれた感情は、やがて殺意へと変わり、真っ白だった思いは、赤と黒で染まってゆく。それが、守りたかった日常の崩壊を、意味していると分かっていながら。たたり殺し。
Isn't that Rena?
何が間違っていたのか。その答えを探して、悲劇はさらに広がってゆく。
Isn't that the Rena speaking there?
北条さんは今日もお休みですか?
Not great.
古出さんは何か知っていますか?
The teacher's voice wasn't critical, but Rika-chan hung her head, unable to answer, and I felt really bad for her. The teacher called Rika-chan up, and they had an exchange in hushed tones in the DS. At first, Rika-chan said that Satoko's fever had gotten worse, but everyone in class knew it was a lie. Because every day, Rika-chan brought Satoko's bento with her.
Satoko-chan, どうしちゃったんだろうね?
What I don't get is why is Rika lying? Like, why can't she tell us what's going on?
俺が知るかよ.
I'm the one who wants to know most of all. It was already the third day since Satoko's first absence. Ever since then, I hadn't felt good. Until just last Sunday, everything had been so much fun. I had reached out to Satoko like a real older brother, and we spent that time quietly, but warm and comfortable. So why had it suddenly been flipped over? The more I thought about it, the more I thought that the world had taken a turn for the worse ever since Oishi's arrival. Thinking on it now, maybe the strange apprehension plaguing me the night before Oishi arrived had been a sign. Kurado Oishi, Oyashiro-sama's servant.
くそ、そんなことあるもんか。あいつが現れたから、聡子が今年のたたりに会う役だなんて決められてたまるかよ。
Just what sort of slip-up had I committed to cause such a fun time to come to an end so suddenly? Yes, it was the day before Oishi appeared. Shion, Mion, and Rena had spoken of the curse surrounding Satoshi and his disappearance, and it was so sinister it gave me a bad premonition. Such a small thing was the slip-up that invited Oyashiro-sama's servant. It was absurd. I kept groaning to myself that I would never accept it yet ever. I obviously wasn't the only one suppressing my feelings. Mion and Rena were too. Everyone in class was doing it. Rika-chan knew something about Satoko's situation, but she wouldn't tell us. Rika-chan still held a calm attitude like a cat basking in the sun. But she was being unbelievably stubborn about this whole thing. That's so weird, because most of the routes we've done, she's been reasonable. She's been probably one of the most reasonable people in the group. She didn't want to tell us, and that wouldn't change no matter how many times we asked her. Everyone understood that, so nobody questioned her.
リカちゃんが言わないならさ、言うまで待つしかないよね。
I don't like that.
逆に言わないってことは、言う必要もない程度のことかもしれないし。
There was no persuasive power in reassurance given with an anxious face like that. Mion was being taciturn, just looked up at the sky with a somehow annoyed expression. I couldn't tell if she was unhappy that Rika-chan wouldn't talk about it with her own friends, or if she was concerned over Satoko's well-being. I got a healthy dose of both. And what about me? My anxiety was suffocating me day by day. If somebody else were looking at me, then maybe I'd look annoyed like Mion did. Tap, tap. Someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was Tometa-kun and Okumura-kun.
前原さん、ちょっといいですか？
またボールが引っかかったか？今度はお前たちで何とかしてみろよ。いつまでも先輩に頼るのは良くないぜ。
I didn't feel like going with them, so I was a little unsympathetic with my response.
ちょっと気になる噂を聞いたんすよ。
Oh boy, here we go.
噂？
はい。ひょっとすると、関係があるかもと思って。
Like, tell me. I got to move this over a bit. A rumor about Satoko. They hadn't said that, but it didn't seem unrelated. They didn't want to talk in the classroom, so they pulled me behind the school building, lending further credence to that thought. The back of the school was damp and humid as always. Students didn't really come here because they wanted to. It might, however, have been the ideal location for trading rumors away from prying eyes.
富田君、岡村君、その噂話って、もちろん聡子の欠席と関係のある話なんだろうな。
関係があるかはわからないですけど、あるいは。
聡子は一体どうしたってんだ？風邪なのか？それともひょっとしてもっと重い病気か怪我か何かで。
いえ、それが。
Yeah, spit it out!
むしろ逆で、うちのばあちゃんの話だと、昨日の昼にうちの店に豆腐を買いに来たらしいんです。
Okay, that's weird. Oh, Tomita's family runs a tofu shop, added to Okumura-kun.
豆腐屋さんに買い物？
My voice sounded so stupefied, even I can tell. It was understandable. I was worried about what grave illness or injury she had when the person herself had been out and about shopping for tofu.
で、聡子はどうだったんだよ？元気そうだったのか？それとも病み上がりでマスクでもしてたとか、松葉杖で包帯だらけだったとか。
いえ、別に病気とか怪我とかそういうわけじゃなかったらしいんですが。
I should have felt relieved that it wasn't an illness or injury, but my anxiety wasn't going away, because Tomita-kun and Okumura-kun's expressions weren't looking any better.
絹ごし豆腐を一丁買っていったそうなんですが、ばあちゃんが言うにはおかしいと。
おかしい？なぜ？絹ごし豆腐を買って何が悪い？
Irritated by how roundabout they were being, I had to desperately fight that irritation from creeping into my voice.
北条とフルデって、ほら、二人暮らしでそんなにお金持ちってわけじゃないですよね。
Oh.
だから、二人はいつも安い木綿豆腐しか買わないんです。
Right.
一番高い絹ごし豆腐なんか買ったことないんです。
木綿だって絹ごしだってどっちも豆腐だろ？たまにはうまい豆腐が食いたくなっただけかもしれないじゃないか。
それは、そうですけど。
I knew how transparent I sounded right there. This wasn't anything trivial, it was some kind of important clue. Not the cheap firm tofu, but the expensive soft kind. Shopping not in the evening after school, but in the middle of the day. Couldn't figure out what those things meant. As I thought hard about it, Okumura-kun took his turn to speak.
次は僕っすね。これも噂なんですけど、帰ってきたらしいんですよ。
Who?
帰ってきた？何が？誰が？
北条のおじさんが。
Right. We heard about that at the end of the tips. I was hoping for a second it might be Satoshi. I think he's gone. But like I was still thinking that'd be weird. But yeah, this uncle's bad news. I don't like this at all. Satoko's uncle. Right, I think Coach told me about him. Their aunt and uncle had taken them in after Satoko and Satoshi lost their parents in the accident.
去年のお社様のたたりで
怖くなって町に逃げたっていう北条のおじさんです。こいつ、ヤクザみたいな怖くて乱暴なやつで。
Oh no. Everything Coach told me came back in bits and pieces. Right. The mean aunt and uncle who tormented them all the time. I think he said after their aunt was beaten to death by the deviant, he ran away to his lover's house in Okonomiya in fear of the curse.
そいつが帰ってくると、どうして聡子が学校を休んで、真っ昼間に絹ごし豆腐を買う羽目になるんだ？
Come on, Kate. It doesn't take much to think about. I think he came and took her, put her, could have basically stole her away. And I don't like the implication either, because it's like the other thing about the report is it's talked about how he was kind of pimping people out, which is horrifying to think about. And his classmen clammed up and looked downward. There must have been some big hint buried in there. Even if I didn't understand, if I told Mion and Rena about it, maybe they'd know something.
ごめんな、二人とも。せっかく好意で話を聞かせてくれたのに、なんだか問い詰めるような言い方になっちゃって。
あ、いえ、いいっすよ。北条が重病で寝たきりになってないことが分かっただけでも、ほら、儲けもんじゃないですか。
That might be true, but it still won't. It won't make the clouds over my mind fade away.
前原さん、ほらあれ!
Okuma-kun cried wildly, pointing over my shoulder behind me. Startled, I turned around. On the way to the other side of the schoolyard to the school gate, I saw a figure trudging forth. Holy crap, she's here! Huh.
北条だ!
I burst into a run faster than I could speak. So that, as quickly as possible, I could see with my own eyes that she was okay.
Satoko!
Satoko seemed taken aback by me shouting and running over to her.
なんですの、ケイイチさん。突然大声を出して走ってくるから何事かと驚きましたわ。
Well, you came stumbling in after being missing for like basically a day and a half, and you looked off.
バカ！俺のことなんかどうでもいいだろう。それより、どうしたってんだよ、サトコ。俺心配で。
心配性ですわね。たかだか3日ですわよ。もうケイイチさんは心配性なんですから。
From listening to her, she sounded like the normal Satoko, but I could tell she was clearly acting strangely. Her smile was somehow forlorn, and her complexion was bad for some reason.
北条! 大丈夫だったのかよ。風邪とかじゃないのか?
Tomita-kun and Okumura-kun both expressed their concerns.
一体どうしたってんだよ。3日も俺がどれだけ心配してたか。
ごめん遊ばせですわ。ちょっとお家のお掃除をしたりしてたんですのよ。
Okay.
だいぶ長いこと使ってませんでしたから、もう家中ホコリだらけでして。
はぁ？サトコ、お前何を言ってんだ？なんで家の掃除なんかで学校を休まなきゃなんないんだ？
Satoko didn't answer me. Instead, she passed by me and headed for the entrance.
もう、今はお弁当の時間ではありませんの？私はお腹が空いてますのよ。
It was certainly lunch break. I couldn't force her to stop after she told me she wanted lunch and she was so hungry.
まあいいや。リカちゃんは3日間、毎日お前の弁当を持ってきてくれてるんだぜ。今日はちゃんと食べてやれそうだな。とにかく、早く教室へ行こう。みんなを安心させてやろうぜ。
そうですわね。皆さんにご心配をおかけしてしまったかもしれませんわね。あははは。人気者は辛いでございますわ。
I put a hand on Satoko's shoulder and we ran to the classroom together. Up close, I was able to verify that Satoko looked somehow weak. All this anxiety was supposed to go away when I saw her again. That's what I had thought. But now, I actually started to have quite different fears. What the heck happened, Satoko? Everyone in the class, of course, reacted the same way exact way I had. We worried about you. I'm glad to see you well. What were you doing for 3 days? Our classmates showered her in questions.
本当にご迷惑をおかけしましたわね。あははは。
As she cackled, she chowed down on a bento Rika-chan made for her. And those in the teacher's lounge must have been informed of Satoko's arrival because our teacher sprinted into the classroom, her breathing ragged.
北条さん。
あら先生、3日間もご心配をおかけしましたわね。あはははは。 ご覧の通り、元気でピンピンしてますわ。
もう、本当に心配してたんですからね。お弁当が食べ終わったら、職員室に来るんですよ。いろいろとお話があります。
3日もサボったから、きっと大目玉に違いありませんわね。
She's like forcing a laugh after everything she says. Satoko laughed sheepishly while she scratched her head. The rest of his class burst out into laughter. The teacher was acting angry, but she breathed a sigh of relief at seeing Satoko healthy and smiling as she ate her lunch with the class surrounding her.
でも、安心したよな、レナ。
あ、ごめん。無事でよかったよね。
I looked at Rena and knew. She had sensed that something about Satoko was off too. I looked to see Mion detached from the clamor as well, with a somewhat grim expression. But Rika-chan, on the other hand, was smiling from ear to ear. She spread out the bento boxes one by one as Satoko finished them. Finally, Satoko was satisfied, and after enjoying a thorough conversation with her classmates, remembered that she'd been called to the teacher's lounge.
めんどくさいんですけど、行かないともっと怒られてしまいそうですからね。僕も一緒に行きますですよ。
Satoko rises from her seat and Rika-chan runs over to her.
ごめん遊ばせ圭一さん。ちょっと怒られてまいりますわ。
おう、なんだったら俺も一緒に付き合うぜ。例のカレーの悪口の時、一緒に職員室で怒られた仲じゃねえか。
それには及ばないのです。圭一はここでお留守番なのですよ。
Maybe Rika's kind of sending us that message like, I'll keep an eye on her, but you guys talk. Rika-chan's words were gentle, but the firm rejection was clear in her eyes. The two of them exited the hallway, walking shoulder to shoulder. After seeing them off, the class breathed a collective sigh of relief, broke apart, and went back to their usual lunch break banter. We, however, couldn't go back to how we usually were. Yeah, let's have a real good chat here. Not I, not Mion, and of course not Rena. They stared at the classroom exit as Satoko and Rika-chan left through there, their expressions a little distant and grim.
俺たちは仲間だ。そうだろう、みんな。
I blurted out something strange, so Mion and Rena turned around with dubious expressions.
俺は仲間に隠し事はしない。だから、さっき聞いたばかりのことを言う。
I told them the story I'd heard from Tomita-kun and Kumura-kun earlier about the tofu shop, how Satoko's uncle had apparently come back. All at once without letting them speak.
これが俺の知るすべてだ。だからミオンもレナもしていることがあるなら話してくれ。
What a healthy approach to disseminating information and asking for it in return. Man, this would have been useful in part 1 and 2.
俺は俺の知るすべてを話したぞ。
I ended my sentence firmly and looked at Mion and Rena's eyes in turn. Rena stared right back at me. Her eyes didn't falter. Without even opening her mouth, I could tell she wasn't hiding anything. Then our gazes turned to Mion.
別に、私は隠して黙ってるわけじゃないよ。
Mion couldn't seem to endure our silent stares and began to talk timidly as if she was guilty of something.
でも、ケイちゃんが話したなら、私も話さないわけにはいかないよね。
Yeah.
みーちゃん、何か知ってるの？
It's probably that she goes, something is that she guesses.
いや、聡子のおじが帰ってきたっての。
Okay.
帰ってきた初日から知ってたよ。
That's odd, then why didn't you say something?
この間の日曜日に、ふらっとHinamizawaに帰ってきたって。
どうしてそれを黙ってた？
ごめん。
An angry shout caused Mion to flinch away, look down, and hang her head uncomfortably.
圭一くん、怒るようなことじゃないよ。みーちゃん怖がってる。
あ、ごめん。つい大声を。
I lowered my head in apology. Mion accepted it, collected herself, and continued. According to her, her uncle's relationship with his lover, whom I had been with in Okinomiya, had collapsed. Without anywhere to go, he went back home to Hinamizawa. And on that Sunday, the day of the barbecue, her uncle ran into Satoko and brought her back to the house.
自宅になんで連れ戻すんだよ。
ろくでなしの寄生虫だからね。
Mm.
自分一人じゃ炊事はおろか、掃除一つできないし。
That's not true. You could be a terrible cook, but you can still cook something. And you definitely can clean. If you have working limbs, you can clean.
そんな、炊事やお掃除のためにさとこちゃんを連れ戻したっていうの？
I remember that she said she'd been cleaning the house when I met her back at the school gate. I'm guessing that she hasn't been allowed to eat much either. A moment later, the pieces found a place into a jigsaw puzzle of unease. And as for what the puzzle depicted when I saw it from afar, I could see the answer clearly.
さとこが家に閉じ込められて、
Domestic abuse.
いじめられながら家事をやらされてるっていう噂なんだよ。
Oh, this is quite a pickle. If you knew that, why didn't you speak up? I nearly yelled at him, Mion, but hastily stopped myself.
みーちゃん、それ本当なの？
私がこの目で確かめたわけじゃないから、本当かどうかは知らないけど。
Mion looked down again and stared at the floor, grew quiet.
去年みたいに？意地悪なおじさん夫婦のところで暮らしてた時みたいに？
It's the same uncle.
でもさ、そのおじさんって家事はからっきしなんだろ？さとこが重宝なわけだから、何もいじめてるってわけじゃないかもしれないだろ？
圭一くん、何を根拠に言ってるのか知らないけど。
Yeah, that's not how that works.
いい加減なことは言わない方がいいよ。
Rena clearly and directly got mad at me. You don't know much about this, so don't talk like you do. Yes, that's clearly what she meant.
じゃあレナは知ってるのかよ？
私だって知らないよ。今ここで聞くまで、さとこちゃんがおじさんの家に連れ戻されたなんて知らなかったもの。でもね、1年前とはまるで状況が違うの。
状況が違うってどういうことだよ？
No Satoshi to keep her safe.
サトシくんがいない。
サトシはすごく妹思いのいい兄だったんだよ。いつもサトコをかばってた。
Right.
意地悪なおじおばのとばっちりが少しでもサトコにかぶらないように盾になってくれてた。
家には意地悪なおじさんとさとこちゃんが二人きりなんだよ。
Right.
それがどれだけ行き詰まるものか、圭一くんにだって想像がつくんじゃないかな。Hinamizawaに帰ってきた理由だって身を寄せてた愛人が蒸発したからでしょ。
And it said that she collapsed, maybe from like abuse and malnutrition.
そんな不愉快な理由で帰ってきた人がどうしてさとこちゃんに優しくできるっていうの？
All right. Can we join the cult that picks the people who vanish? I feel like we've got a good reason for it this time. She was right. It wasn't easy for me to imagine Satoko not being tormented.
ごめん。
あ、こっちこそごめん。問い詰めるような口調になっちゃったね。
An awkward atmosphere floated among us. The three of us remained silent, just stared at the floor. Family issues like this are tough because it's like, what do you do? If things get bad, you could always call the police or Child Protective Services or something, but that also feels bad because it's like, then you feel like you're ripping family apart. Family's family, but then like you also don't want to like protect people who are abusing other people. You don't want to like let them just continue because it's inconvenient. It's gross. Families shouldn't treat each other like that. And it sucks because it's so much more distasteful. Because Satoko's not like, it's not like she's like old enough to just strike it out on her own. Despite the fact that she's basically forced to for the past, year or two? And now she's being forced to take care of her deadbeat uncle. And that's probably the nicest of the potential options of what's happening. Finally, we hear the principal's bell ringing. Teacher came back with Satoko and Rika-chan at her side.
さあさあ、午後の授業を始めますよ。委員長、号令。起立。
ごめんなさいね。失礼。
I couldn't read anything from Satoko's vaguely sheepish expression. But given the clouded look Rika-chan was wearing behind her, it was tough to laugh off the disquieting story I'd heard from Mion. Okay.
Yosh!
So, I'm guessing Satoko won't be able to stay for club activities. And then I've never been so on board with Watanagashi. I almost see the appeal now. It's like, it's been horrible, right? Terrible things that people do. But then you see situations like this, and you're like, you know what, maybe we just need to have a little Watanagashi once in a while, right? I mean, sometimes it feels warranted. I'm not psychotic for thinking that, right? Oh gosh, what's happening to me?
久々に全メンバーが揃ったからね。久しぶりにパーッと大部活で盛り上がろうじゃないの。
Yeah, perfect. Indeed, in times like these, the best thing we do is obviously get rowdy and scheme against one another in a club activity.
望むところだよ。ねえ、さとこちゃん、やろう。
さとこが好きだったゲームあるでしょ。ほら、なんだったっけ。
Is she like already gone?
なんでも構わないよ。行ってみ。
Mion laughed happily. Took a bunch of games out of the club locker and lined them up on the desk. I think that was the first time Mion's ever let someone else decide a game for her. Could tell she was being especially considerate to Satoko. Thinking that whatever her circumstances, if we just had enjoyed our time together as a group, there might be some comfort, some diversion. Satoko seemed to understand her feelings too, and smiled vaguely, though pleased. But her head slowly moved from side to side.
ありがたいですけど、お気持ちだけで結構ですわ。いろいろしなければならないことがありますので。
Even Rika-chan hung her head in remorse.
おい、本気なわけ？部活メンバーが久しぶりに揃ったってのに、お流れになっちゃうわけ？敵前逃亡は罰ゲームってのは、快速第何条だったっけ？
やめなよ、みーちゃん。無理に付き合わせちゃダメだよ。
別におじさんは無理強いしてるわけじゃないよ。ただ、大盛り上がりした方が絶対に楽しいと思って。
本当にお気持ちだけで嬉しいんですのよ。ご安心なさいませ。次に戦うときは皆さんまとめてでっかい罠にはめてご覧に入れますわ。
Satoko, while insulting us, still said she couldn't participate in the club today and apologized. She quickly put her things into her bag, pattered out into the hallway, disappearing. It all happened in a blink of an eye.
Satoko.
Rika-chan stared lonesomely after her friend hurried home, unable to be part of club activities. Silence filled the classroom. Both the cheerful voices of our classmates in the schoolyard and the voices of the cicadas sounded like they were coming from somewhere faraway world.
つまんないの?
The silence was broken by Mion's bitterness as she began putting the games on the desk back into the locker. Everyone just stared absently at Satoko's seat, now empty.
リカちゃん、そろそろ話してくれてもいいんじゃないかな。
Rena made a gentle smile as she possibly could and spoke softly to Rika-chan. Even without hearing it from her, we pretty much knew the situation at this point. Satoko's uncle had broken up with his lover, come back home to Hinamizawa, and he'd taken Satoko back home and forced her to do all the housework. And that all had to be pretty rough on her. Thinking this was common knowledge to everyone, I skipped to the important part.
だいぶひどいのか?
Maybe Rena wanted to ask the same question. Nobody spoke. We all just stared, waiting for Rika-chan's reply. Rika-chan didn't answer us. We were hoping to hear her to say no, but her silence is bad enough sign.
去年だっけ？おじ夫婦の元にいた時もこんな状況だったんだろ
う？あの時は夫婦喧嘩のとばっちりみたいなのがほとんどだったからさ。こうして部活で時間を潰して家にいる時間を極力減らすのも一つの手だったんだけど。
Reducing her time at home as much as we could.
今は家事を強制されてるから、学校に残ることもできないんだね。
Shoot. Satiko's not a slave? Who do you think you are, ignoring your own inability to live properly and basically putting Satiko under house arrest? No, this is sadly true. Parents will feel obligated to their children, or feel like their children are obligated to them. In modern times, it's not so much revolving around like chores necessarily. It can be. I think the more common traits that we see in this type of of abuse is in the form of like forced childcare. So making older kids stay home and take care of the young kids so that the parents can like drink and party or just relax and not like really pay attention to their children. It can take the form of parents like forging their signatures and taking out things like credit cards in the name of their children, ruining their credit and racking up debt in their name before they've even turned 18. Thankfully, there's recourse for that. You can often do a non-bankruptcy releasal of incurred debts based on the premises that those cards should never have been allowed to be taken out by someone who was less than 18. But it still can do really damaging to their ability to do things like take out actual loans that they need in the future. And the thing is that abuse can take years to even manifest. And then there's the physical abuse, sexual abuse. These things all still happen today, far too often. I'm really glad I grew up in a home that was very safe. That I never felt like I was in danger or being mistreated. Like, when you're a kid, you always feel like your life's not fair or whatnot, right? But, like, comparatively, I had a wonderful, amazing childhood and a relatively stable home. Like, my parents divorced when I was in middle school, but that's not the most unstable thing that can happen to a home now. And so I'm really grateful that it was as good and positive as it was. But I've seen the families that are torn apart by this. I've seen the families that are wrestling with this. I've also seen kids, you know. I remember one time I visited a home in North Carolina. We were just doing our door-to-door stuff. But, like, it kind of got real for me when we were, like, visiting somebody and they invited us in. And, you know, we saw the signs and it was pretty evident through events that occurred later that the lady who was living there was by herself. She didn't have a husband or even like a stable boyfriend in that home. But it's clear that she was addicted to drugs. They were living in like government housing. And I remember seeing her kids with like no clothes, diapers over full. And then their beds was just a mattress on the floor. No cover or anything. And like the house had like, I'm pretty sure it had like fleas, and they always had a TV. Like she somehow had the means to get a gigantic TV that was constantly going on, and a nice phone that she always had in her hand. And yet, she talked about and would ask for like cash and donations to help feed her kids, ostensibly. And I just don't know what you can do about that kind of a situation, right? It's hard to know, especially when it feels like it's not really your business. But it's like, because you just see a little glimpse of like what's going on as a stranger who's in the neighborhood, walking by or just having a conversation with somebody, and then you're faced with that choice, the wondering, lingering question after you leave of like, I was barely a blip in the day-to-day life of those kids, but should I have done something more? Could I have done something more? It's not like I was in a position to take responsibility for anything that happened. But is that really a way that people should live and grow up? Is there really no other option? In the foster care system itself, you know, the ultimate fate of kids that might be taken away from a dangerous situation. And then can I sit there and be like, oh yeah, that's totally the better path. That's going to be much healthier. It puts you in this really awkward position because you just don't know what to do. And especially for police involvement, like there has to be some very clear signs of like abuse, imminent danger. And so, you can't just call the police. Like, even about this uncle situation, it's like, technically, he's not bringing her direct harm, at least that we can tell. Obviously, it is direct harm if he starves her or locks her away, but unless we can prove that it happened beyond a reasonable doubt, and probably from, like, adults, because children don't often make great witnesses for court. It puts us in this position as Satoko's friends in a really, really rough spot, because there's very limited things that we can even do. Because he's gonna tiptoe along that line of, like, what is, like, legal and illegal. He's gonna be dancing and flirting with that line. So, like, technically, the situation as it's been depicted so far would not only not be considered illegal, they would probably say it was beyond, like, it wasn't a worthwhile concern. So far, the closest sign that we're seeing to an actual concern is the fact that it seems like she might not be eating. Because she looked exhausted and pale. And when she came home, she basically came to school, she ate 2 lunches. Kids that are ravenous at lunch is a surefire sign that things aren't stable at the home. In fact, in the United States, there's a bunch of laws that were passed for a while, especially through COVID, but even after COVID for some places, where school lunches became free for all students. But most places have, like, a setup where if you come from a home that is less stable or has poor income, often kids would get free food at school. And it's one of those things where it's like, I understand why people are like, oh yeah, free handouts, I don't like that. But, like, at the same time, it's like, kids are often in these positions where they just don't have the ability to, like, they can't just go get a job. They can't just go dictate their own life. They're at the whims of parents that might be doing terrible, neglectful things. And so, like, those school lunches can be a lifeline for kids. They can be a source of consistent meals and diet and nutrition that might not be stable at home. Or if they even have parents who just, will just go over and, put a frozen pizza in the oven every night. It's highly disturbing and very, very troubling, because, like, these are real things that really happen to people. And I feel like it's hard to know when the right time to intervene is. It's hard to know what the kind of intervention you can do that might be meaningful will be. So what they're going to discuss now, they're probably going to come to that same conclusion, that there's really nothing we can do, as frustrating as that is. Who do you think you are, ignoring your own inability to live properly and basically putting Satoko under house arrest?
常識的に考えてこんなのおかしいんじゃねえのか。いろいろと状況証拠は必要だろうけど、こういうのって虐待だろ。
Yeah, this is the problem. It's really tough to prove it in a way that means it's actionable.
警察とかに通報できないのかよ。
そうだよね。体罰の証拠とかがあれば警察に通報できると思うよ。あるいはそういうのって地域の民生委員さんとかに相談できないの？
And I kept saying police, as though it were nothing. But Mion's response sounded like we were a little naive.
みんな簡単に言ってくれるけどさ、それを立証するリスクを考えたことある？
リスクってなんだよ。
一昨年の冬かな。通報したんだよ。児童相談所に。虐待があるからすぐに何とかしてくれって。
Mm-hmm. I miss her. I remember her family isn't just like a random citizen, like they have influence.
そうだったんだ。それで？
電話してすぐにお役所の人が来てくれたよ。で、さとことかさとしとかに事情聴取してた。ついでにおじ夫婦のところにもね。
さとことさとしに聞くまではいいが、おじ夫婦にまで聞くのはまずいんじゃないのか？
Well, the problem is that people will do false flag calls about abuse. Like, sometimes people think that a good way to try and disrupt a home or to get revenge on somebody is to call Child Protective Services. So, like, unfortunately, they have to be very careful that they don't just willy-nilly rip children away from parents that aren't actually abusing them.
両者の意見を聞いて総合的に判断するんだとさ。ご立派ご立派。
で、結果はどうだったの？
様子見。
様子見って、なんだよ、それ。
Yep. Unfortunately, most of the time, the position of these types of agencies is we have to wait and see. It has to get bad enough. It has to get clear enough. It has to be, like, traceable. Basically, if you have bruising and clear signs of, like trauma, that's probably the only surefire way to actually be actionable. Otherwise, you basically have to wait for something like a hospitalization.
おじさん、とっても勉強になっちゃったんだけどさ、法律ではね、暴行か育児放棄が認められなきゃ虐待とは言わないんだってさ。
So again, you can skirt the line, you can get pretty close, but not actually cross it.
さとこもさとしもよく小づかれてたらしいけど、別に傷跡が残るようなレベルじゃなかったし、3食の飯も一応食えてたし、ね、心理的外傷を与える言動だって別にカセットテープで証拠があったわけじゃないし、村の人たちだって実際に乱暴してる現場は見たことないからね。いくら意地悪だからって人前で乱暴はしないでしょ、誰だって。
で、その後どうなったの？
しばらくは毎週決まった日に民生委員さんが訪問してたみたい。おじ夫婦も自分たちが見張られてることを気にして目立ついじめはしなくなったらしいけど、それで済むわけないでしょ。
Right. And the big downside too is that when they get called, eventually when the officer leaves, they often will punish the kids, blaming them for drawing attention, even if they had nothing to do with the call.
より陰湿ないじめ方に加速していったってことだね。
I've seen this myself. Mion sighed and nodded.
おばのやつが特にねちっこくってさ、女特有の陰湿さっていうのかな。相当いやらしいことをしてたらしいよ。さとこ、最後の方は呼吸するだけのボロ人形みたいだった。
Oh gosh. So what? From the conclusion, does that mean they never should have contact with child welfare in the first place?
わかった？誰の目にも明らかな虐待の証拠がなかったらお手上げなんだよ。
And if we do, it'll make things worse.
むしろ状況を悪化させかねない。あれは失敗だった。
After hearing that, even public organizations, the one thing that they were dependable, that one thing they thought was dependable couldn't do anything. Everyone hung their heads.
つまり、誰の目にも明らかな虐待の証拠が見つかるまで通報すべきでないってことなんだね。
We can't. Unless... Oh, Yashiro-sama? I mean... He tends to grab the people who seem untouchable.
うん、まあそういうこと。
I consider Satoko's current situation. She was brought back to her house. It was a little difficult to call it out abuse. She was being tormented and forced to do the chores. How was she being tormented would be the key, but without concrete evidence, it would be difficult to prove. If she had some kind of external injury, that would work. But as far as we could tell from today, she had nothing like that. And from being forced to do chores, that was a bit weak too. There had to be better evidence that she was without a doubt being abused. I know. Her uncle had ignored Satoko's existence for a whole year and went to live with his lover in town. Didn't that fall under one of the definitions of abuse that Miyana mentioned, child neglect?
うん、それは立派な育児放棄だね。どうなの、みーちゃん。
おじが今もいなければ育児放棄は認定されそうだけど、今この瞬間は同居してるわけでしょ。
So ironically, if we'd called him out on this or tried to get him punished like a few weeks ago, it probably would have worked. But now...
今までは別居だったけど、心を入れ替えて同居することにしたなんて言われたら、また様子見なんてことになりかねないよ。
Once we reported it, we would need to be absolutely sure they'd interpret it as abuse. Maybe we needed far more concrete evidence, lest we repeat last year's mistake.
なんだか悲しい。
It is.
ということはつまり、さとこちゃんが乱暴されて大きな傷が残るまで黙って見てろってことなんだよね。
It could be even harder than that, though, because... First of all, that's horrible to think about, right? But again, it's also like... How do you even know? And if it gets that bad, it could go way further, too. The only plan I could think of was, in the end, just watching and waiting. It left me in shock when I realized it would be the same policy that the officials who had made the situation worse. As Mion said, reporting at public agencies would be a gamble. If we're going to pick a fight, it would have to be one we couldn't afford to lose. If we're gambling without even enough money, even with enough evidence, our defeat would be assured. If we took the time to amass enough money that we could be sure of victory, then that would mean pretending we didn't see Satoko's plight for a considerable amount of time.
こんなところで話を振ってごめんな。リカちゃんはどうして一人暮らしができるんだ？
Rika-chan had lost her parents, if I recall correctly. From what I'd heard, she had no relatives either. She was forced to live on her own as a result, but her life was unfettered, free of restriction. If she could somehow grant that freedom to Satoko too.
ほら、リカちゃんって両親いないのに生活してるだろ。保護者のいない子供って孤児院みたいなところに入れられちゃうんじゃないっけ？
ケイチ君。
Yeah.
それひどい。
He's trying to think of options and solutions, but he's definitely being really kind of a jerk here.
悪口で言ってるんじゃねえよ。そこにサトコを救うヒントがあるかもしれないと思って聞いてみただけなんだ。リカちゃん、気分を害したならごめんな。
Rika-chan shook her head, not particularly disturbed.
それはですね、実は村長さんちの子供になっているからなのです。
Right.
補足がいるね。村長の君吉のおじいちゃんがリカちゃんの保護者なんだよ。
Right.
ちゃんと県知事の許可を得た正式な。
養子みたいなものか？
Not really.
養子とは違う。別に籍を入れなくても保護者にはなれるんだよ。
分かってきた。つまりリカちゃんは普通に暮らしてるけど、法律の上では村長さんの家に住んでることになってるんだね。
Which is still kind of odd. Normally, a guardian would be required to house like their charge, but again, maybe the house is owned by the mayor. I guess it's an old family home, right? Her old like there's the big property that she doesn't live in because it's too big, and then the small outback like building that was basically a shed that's now been converted to an apartment. So that might be like it's technically like Rika's and her family's. And then the mayor, like, it would be normal for the mayor to have her live with him, but if she chose not to, he'd probably respect her wishes.
まあそんなとこ。そのおかげでリカちゃんは孤児院送りを免れてるってわけ。孤児院っていうか児童養護院のことだけど。
難しいことはよくわかりませんが、つまりはそういうことなのです。
ミオン、今興味深いことを言ったな。席が違っても保護者になれるみたいなことを言ったよな。じゃあ形だけでも村長さんとかがサトコの保護者になってくれればいいんじゃないのか？
Not with the uncle here on paper. Then she'd be in the same position as Rika-chan. And she could go back to her old life.
ところがそうはいかないの。だっておじだって保護者のつもりなんだもん。
And even if he tried, unless he like willfully rejected her guardianship over her. Sorry, the state would never recognize that, like somebody else stepping in like that.
ちょっと待て、わけがわからなくなったぞ。そもそも保護者ってなんだ？
In legal terms, a guardian and a parent weren't necessarily synonyms. So whoever was actually looking after her at home would be considered her guardian.
なら、おじは保護者じゃないな。ずっとサトコをほったらかしにしてた。
でも保護者だと主張されたらそれまでだよ。サトコが連れ戻されてから数日。その間の食事代はおじの財布から出てるよね。一応面倒を見てると主張できなくもない。それに1年間サトコをほったらかしたとはいえ、最初の1年間は生活の面倒を見た実績がある。でも村長にはその実績はない。
意地悪なおじさんと村長さんが同時に保護者を主張したら、おじさんの方が強いってこと？
And again, in case you gotta remember that this is going to be a decision made by people who don't live with these people, don't know them personally, and probably are looking at everything on a document rather than actually like trying to understand like every intricate detail of their relationship.
その可能性が高いってこと。それに 保護者ってのは実際に面倒を見てる人を指すんだよ。実際に寝床や食事を握ってるおじと名義だけ貸そうとしてる村長じゃどうにもならない。
じゃあ村長が実際に生活の面倒を見ればいいじゃないか。そうすれば名実ともに村長が保護者になれるんだろう。
We just needed to shelter Satoko. It might lead to her uncle being desperate to take her back, but we'll stubbornly refuse him.
そんな簡単にはいかないよ。聡子は育ち盛りの女の子なんだよ。人間一人の面倒を見てくださいなんて猫の子預けるのとはわけが違う。
じゃあ監督はどうだよ。監督ってよくは知らないけど裕福なんだろ。自分で言ってたくらいなんだし、本当の親でなくても保護者になれるなら監督でも可能なんだ。
First of all, don't trust that man to be a good guardian. I think he'd just have a whole different range of abuse, but I get why he's saying this.
監督なら聡子の面倒を立派に見てくれる気がする。
だから聡子をペットみたいに考えないで。ケイちゃんはさっきから聡子を誰かに押し付ける話ばっかり。人間一人の生活の面倒を見る責任ってものをもっと慎重に考えて。監督に聞いたの。聡子を引き取って面倒を見るってちゃんと確約を得たわけ？
そんなの得て。でも監督なら絶対に OK するだろ
う。まあいいよ。100歩譲って監督が OK したとするよ。でもダメなんだよ。保護者は独身じゃダメなんだよ。
Ah, that's right. Coach, didn't he say it himself? He was alone, so he couldn't do it. Shoot, what the heck? Why is being single such a disadvantage in this society? Yeah, well, it has a lot to do with like the fact that it is hard for one person to raise a family or take care of kids. It's hard enough when people are forced to do it with like, when, you know, like circumstances lead to that. Willfully putting people in that situation is just something that the state's usually not willing to do. Then all you have to do is marry a wealthy family, couldn't you?
Hinamizawaにそんなお金持ちはいるのかな。難しそう。
ね、簡単じゃないんだよ。人間一人引き取るってのは。誰かに押し付けようなんて短絡的な考えがそもそもダメなの。考えが浅いんだよ、ケイちゃんは。
なんなんだよ、畜生。俺は必死に聡子を救おうと考えてるのに、ダメだってそればっかり。
Well, it's because you're not giving reasonable answers, unfortunately.
お前ら、本当は聡子のことなんかどうでもいいんだろ。仲間のこと、本気で心配してないんだろ。どうなんだよ。
Slap him.
そんなつもりないよ。でも、そう簡単にはいかないっていうか。
そんな難しい話じゃねえだろ。
It is, though.
裕福な奴が聡子をしばらく面倒見てくれればいい。それだけのことだぞ。
Well, why don't you do it?
そうだ、ミオンチはどうだよ。お前御三家とかいう立派な家柄なんだって自慢してたよな。話じゃものすごいでかい家に住んでるそうじゃないか。
うち？無理。そんなのバチャが許してくれるはずない。
じゃあ沖宮に住んでる親は。聞いた話じゃこっちもかなりの豪邸に住んでるらしいじゃないか。
Casey, calm down.
町には親類の経営する店がたくさんあるそうだし、立派な資産家じゃないかよ。おい、
ダメ。沖宮の家なんてもっとダメ。うちのお父さんそんなの絶対に許さない。
おい、普段は散々大物ぶりを自慢しといて、ここ一番で及び腰かよ。
Calm down, dude.
なんだよお前、聡子を見殺しにする気かよ。
そんなつもりはないけど、そりゃ私だって聡子は助けてやりたいよ。
I feel like Casey's going crazy here.
でもそれとこれじゃ話が
違うってのかよ。冷てえやつ。仲間の危機だろ。ここで救わなかったら何なんだよ。部長だろ。
What about you, dude?
部活の救えよ。
What about you? Why don't you tell your parents?
仲間の危機をよ。今ここで救わなかったら仲間じゃねえ、人じゃねえ。お前の人間性が問われてるんだよ。
Sheesh.
聞いてるのかよ、ミオン。
My emotions all exploded out of me and didn't even give her a chance to say anything in response. I just wanted to make Mion agree with me, even if I had to force her. If she did, Satoko's problems would be solved. If pushing her would solve the issue, then I'd push her as much as I need to. Dude, like, that's the thing. All you need to do to reverse this is be like, Keiichi, why don't you and your family do it? And be like, fine! and then it won't work.
何さっきから黙り込んでんだよ。聞いてるのかこの野郎。どうなんだよ。なんとか言ってるよ、園崎美代。
Sheesh, dude.
Me?
Mion, looking down with a grim face, began sobbing. Her hands were clenched into trembling fists, and she rubbed her eyes, wiping away the tears. Was what I said actually that mean? Yeah! Isn't it time to cry when we're gambling room now? We have to do something to save Satoko. And I thought that Rena spoke, her voice cold and incredibly calm.
ケイチくん、みーちゃんちがダメなら他の裕福な家を探したら？私、Hinamizawaに立派な豪邸建てて住んでる人。
Here it comes.
知ってるよ。
She's gonna slap it right in your face.
誰だよ。
白々しいよ。あれだけ立派な家に住んでて、自分の家だけは蚊帳の外？
俺んちかよ。俺の家は。
仲間なんでしょ？救ってよ、ケイチくんが。みーちゃんはダメだってさ。じゃあ仲間思いのケイチくんがお手本示さなきゃダメだね。
Exactly.
あれだけ大きなお家に家族3人で住んでるんだっけ？じゃあ空き部屋なんかいくらでもあるよね。
Yep.
余ってるお部屋、いくつかさとこちゃんに分けてあげればいいじゃない。それでめでたくさとこちゃんの悩みは解決。あら何？これでもう終わり？あっけない話だったね。はい解決、お疲れ様。じゃあもう今日はいい？私帰るね。ラン。今日は久しぶりに宝探しにでも行こうかな。
Just flipping it right back in your face,
ずっ
dude.
とさとこちゃんのことが心配で全然遊ぶ気になんかならなかったし、今日はどんな宝物が見つかるかな？はう。
Definitely, it's just kind of playing her cards on how much she can fake things.
なんか言ってよ。私だけ喋りずくめ？黙ってんじゃないわよ。聞いてんの？前原圭一。
Honestly, Scary Rena's right, and Scary Rena's in the right here. Come on, dude. Speak up, man. Even the cicada seemed to cower in fear. Rena, her shoulders bobbing up and down, and me, who'd forgotten to breathe. Mion, whose face had gone completely pale, and Rika-chan, who was keeping silent as if nothing had happened. The atmosphere in the classroom grew tight and stiff and petrified us where we stood. Rattle. Sound of the chair as Rena sat back down after having stood up, finally allowing everyone present to take a breath. Rena, that just showed me how much I'd hurt Mion.
レナが怖いのです。
Yeah, but we needed her. After a few moments, Rika-chan cut into the frozen air.
<laughs> ごめんね、リカちゃん。みーちゃんもごめん。ケイチくんには謝らなくてもいいよね。
She's like, sorry, you two. I don't have to apologize to you, though, do I?
ああ、ごめん。めちゃくちゃなこと言って悪かった。
さっきのあれ、私に言ってたの？みーちゃん睨みながら言ってたから、私てっきりみーちゃんに言ってるもんだとばかり思ってた。
Rena had such strength that you wouldn't have imagined it normally. All I did was spout terrible things, and a wave of violent fury passed over me. I couldn't contend with her.
ミオン、ごめん。頭に血が上ってた。
No, you didn't just lose your cool, dude. You really were being unreasonable. Come to think of it, I didn't understand what had gotten me all that riled up. I thought of myself as Satoko's Nini, so I only had good intentions. I thought about it a little harder than everyone else, and yet...
いいよ。
No, it's not.
私こそ、ケイちゃんが一生懸命悩んでるのに、あれはダメ、これはダメばっかり言って。ごめんね。私も、悪かった。
Mion rubbed away the tears at the corner of her eyes with a fist and apologized as well. We bowed our heads to each other, looked down without glancing at the other. Yeah, Casey, eat that freaking shoe. Someone, I don't know who, heaved a sigh. Satoko, being tormented, had been known about since last year. How had the tragedy back then saved Satoko? How had they brought it to an end? Right. In the end, nobody could do anything. All they could do is bear it patiently and wait for those agonizing days to end. That's right. The one who brought to an end all those terrible days was some crazy drug addict nobody knew. On the night of Watanagashi last year, the mean ant had been beaten to death. But it hadn't been done to save Satoko or Satoshi. Right. It really was just a coincidence. Satoko's friends, who needed to do something for her most of all, could do nothing. The incident may have been a tragic one, but from Satoko's viewpoint, it was nothing less than a miracle. Yes, a miracle. A miracle that one could only wait for.
待つしかないのかよ、俺たちには。
Not for evidence of abuse, not for something that minor.
何をかな。
奇跡。
No one made fun of me for using such a crazy word. We couldn't come up with any solution, so it was the only thing we could do.
無力なんだよ、私たちは。
The word Mion dropped was the finishing blow. It was hot. My body was sick, was sticky with sweat. The worst month, June. I'm still saying, there's technically, you say miracle, divine intervention. Am I really going to be on the side of the curse this time? I walked forward quite a ways, then turned right where the rice fields ended. I'd never come here before, so I had no idea where to go. I got lost several times, so I may have taken quite a long way around. Maybe I should have gone back home and gotten my bike first. It would have made everyone else worry if I'd asked them, so I asked one of our other classmates where Satoko's actual house was. The house was originally her family's, apparently, not their uncle and his wife's. The house had been bigger, so they had taken it for themselves. Right here. Several houses all in a line. Over there? I was visiting Satoko's house, but didn't particularly intend to meet her there. I didn't mean to spy on the enemy. Her mean uncle either. Maybe I just wanted to be a little closer to her as her Nini. Pretty words, but I didn't know if they were true. If what Tomotaka-kun and the others were told me was right, it'd be this house? When I recognized it, my feet grew heavy. What did I come here for? My motive for coming here was absurd. When Mion said at the end that we were powerless, it made me sort of frustrated. I just wanted to do something, anything, other than waste my day away praying for a miracle. That's what made me come here. But that was all. Even if I were to witness her uncle actually tormenting Satoko, what could I do? Would I act like a comic book hero and punch the guy in the face and take Satoko away with me? And then live together somewhere far away? That was ridiculous.
俺は無力だ。
The cicadas' voices raised in chorus sounded like they were scoffing at me. As though they were saying that if I couldn't do anything, then I wouldn't do anything, then I should just go back home. I heard the car approaching, so I got out of the way. But the car stopped right beside me, its horn honking shortly once. Annoyed, hadn't I got out of the way, looked behind me, and a familiar face was looking at me through the driver's seat window.
監督。
Oh, I thought it was going to be Oishi for a second.
こんにちは、前原さん。こんなところでお会いするとは本当に奇遇です。お家は近くなんですか?
Me being here wasn't normal. Just as I considered somehow giving him the slip, I noticed Satoko sitting in the passenger seat.
Satoko?
Satoko got out of the car and began unloading a lot of groceries from the trunk.
買い物の帰りに偶然監督にお会いしたんですのよ。
Look how sad she looks.
送ってくださるというのでお言葉に甘えたのですわ。
自転車でこんなに買い物をしたら運びきれませんからね。
Definitely. As Coach spoke, he pulled Satoko's bike out of the back seat where they'd put it. The grocery bags were big, and there were 4 of them. They all seemed to be packed full of very heavy.
この袋、セブンスマート？おいおい、自転車で行くにはちょっと遠すぎないか？
I looked at the bags and saw they were filled to the brim with sake bottles, snacks to eat with sake, and boxes of cigarettes. The weight was one thing, but their contents was nothing less than luxury items.
監督のおかげで助かりましたわ。ちょっと坂道は辛かったですから。
I freaking bet. Satoko gave Coach a smile filled with gratitude. But it was incredibly awkward, even heartrending.
サトコ、この買い物、今晩の晩飯ってわけじゃないだろ？
当然ですわ。私、お酒なんか飲めませんし、おつまみも嫌いですし、タバコなんか吸うわけ。
He made Satoko go to the distant store by herself on her bike, so she could buy dumb crap like this. And what was our uncle doing right now anyway? He must have been working up a good sweat at their very moment if they needed to send Satoko out by herself, right? If not, then how much How much had Satoko suffered for no reason? I hadn't intended to voice my feelings, but he might have made it into my face. Coach may have noticed because he clapped me on the shoulder. Just then, one of the house windows clattered open in the face of a vulgar man, the very sight of which made me immediately avert my eyes and emerge from within it. There was no self-introductions necessary. My gut told me this was the uncle in question. The first thing out of his mouth should have been words of gratitude for Satoko.
Satoko! 缶のガスかけっぱなしで出よったんな、この。
ごめんなさい。でも、すぐに買いに行けって言ったから。
やかましいわ。せっかくの近所台無しにしよってん。どうしよってんじゃ。
ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。
Oh, I hate this dude so much already. Satoko miserably apologized over and over, bowing again and again. She could have been perfectly described as a small animal. I had no idea what was happening. Satoko finished shopping for all this heavy stuff. It wasn't even for dinner. She only managed to come back because she ran to Coach and drove her home. And she hadn't been found by him. She'd surely still be out by herself, panting and moaning, pedaling her bicycle up that steep hill. What was with these words, those horrible sleazy words that he'd said to Satoko? In what country's dictionary did it tell him to say such things to a young girl who had just finished shopping? My anger, of course, wouldn't reach him. The uncle displayed no interest in me, instead shouting at Coach.
おや、入江の先生じゃないですか。こんにちは。そしたら先生も上がっていきますか。もうオーラスですからすぐ入れますよ。ピンのワンツー、何でもありで。
100 yen per 1,000 points and anything goes. It sounds like a poker game, but like it's a point system, so maybe it's more like bridge or something similar.
いえ、遠慮します。さとこちゃんとは偶然お会いしたんで、ちょっとお送りしてあげただけです。
Wait, 1,000 points actually, you know, it might be Mahjong, now I think about it. That sounds like, that could be, like, I don't know, it's not like I play Mahjong, but I think it is like a game that's based on point systems.
すぐに失礼します。
そんな、ちょっとぐらいやっててくださいな。先生お金持ちじゃないですか。
I didn't even understand what her uncle and Coach were talking about. But I knew one thing for sure, none of what he just said had been to thank Satoko in any way.
さとこ、とっととカキも持ってこんかい。ビールも冷めてもうた。冷蔵庫から冷えてるの出してくれな。
てっちゃん、娘に厳しすぎや。もうちょいいたわらんとかわいそうやで。
あんな娘にゃ、兄貴んちにいた頃からそうでよ。甘やかすと親の言うことをなんも聞かんやっちゃよ。たく。
それよか、てっちゃんのツモだぜよ。
椿さんリーチしよったで。
おう、悪い悪い。なんね。椿、あんたまたリーチかいな。
It looked like it wasn't just her uncle, some of his friends were over. Hey, wait. What is he? No. What were they doing? Flinging rude words left and right, making Satoko go shop for your beer? What were they doing?
町からおじさまのお友達が来てて、麻雀やってますの。
It is Mahjong.
お友達のお夕食もご用意するように言われてますのよ。
なんだよ、それ。
Mahjong? He called his friends over for Mahjong? They were too busy playing, so they sent Satoko to buy a crap load of booze in a faraway store. And the first thing he said to her was how she left the gas on. What the hell? What the hell? What the hell?
何やってんだよ。麻雀って、そんなのに遊びほうけて、さとこにこんなのを買いに行かせるのかよ。
Even though Coach was listening, he pretended he wasn't. There was a line of heavy-looking shopping bags lined up on the ground next to the truck.
さあ、前原さんも手伝ってあげてください。ほら、男の子なんですから。
監督、こんなのまかり通っていいんですか？こんなの絶対に。
Coach pretended he hadn't heard that violent outburst either. When I thought about it later, his reaction might have been the best thing he could do in that situation.
私も2つ持ちますから。ほら、前原さんも持つのを手伝ってあげてください。
The bags were packed to the brim with bottles of sake and bar snacks. They were so heavy. And so filthy. It's so unfair. They weren't just heavy in terms of weight. They made me feel mortified. Nothing could have been heavier than that.
ケイチさん、無理しないでいいんですのよ。
Oh, you do not say that at all. That's so not true.
私も持ちますわ。
Satoko mistook my biting back as humiliation and grimacing under the weight and offered to help.
バカ、 俺を舐めるな。
Satoko had never looked down on me physical strength in the slightest. Ugh.
監督もすみませんわね。重いでしょ。
Not at all, answered Coach, smiling vaguely, coolly. But I alone knew. Coach was an adult, so he just knew how to keep his feelings from showing. There was even more anger than I was feeling, burning deep in his eyes.
いや、重いですね。
Shoot. Wasn't very far from the doorstep to Satoko's house, but the bag squeezed my palms and started leaving red marks. Fury welled up in me and the back of my throat stung. But even if it all came gushing out, it wouldn't solve anything. So, just tightly gritted my teeth was as much as I could do.
本当にありがとうございますですわ。監督も圭一さんもおかげで本当に助かりましたでございます。
And we carried them to the back door. Satoko said that was enough. Occasionally, we'd hear the repulsive laughter of her uncle and his friends within, and my insides would seethe. I knew they weren't ridiculing us, and that was why it made me so mad. They'd made Satoko shop for all the heavy, shellfish stuff and ignored her and laughed amongst themselves as they pleased. It was deeply aggravating. Of course, Coach had to felt the same way. But if he accidentally let his feelings slip on his face, he'd only cause Satoko more worry. He knew that, and spoke coolly, as if to say he didn't care.
いいえ、ささやかでもお力になれたなら、お手伝いできそうなことがあったらいつでも言ってくださいね。
ええ、お気持ちだけでも本当に嬉しいですわ。
That he feels that way? Those words were sad. Satoko herself was sad and resigned, and we could only help her so much. But she was right. No matter how much Coach or I wanted to help Satoko, as much as we could do, I felt absolutely ashamed of not having the power to help her any more than this. Burning, boiling emotions were bubbling up from within me and rising to my throat. Trembling all over, I almost started to cry from the fury.
俺も力になれることがあったらいつでも力を貸すから、頑張れよな。
I wanted to at least give her those trite words saying that I'd help her whenever she wanted.
ええ、ありがとうございますわ。わざわざこうしてここまで来てくださっただけでも嬉しかったですわ。
Satoko seemed to have guessed what I was doing in a place like this, when my house was in the opposite direction from school.
さあ、もう行った方がよろしいですわ。今は酔っ払ってますから、どんな難癖をつけられるかわかりませんわよ。
She felt guilty getting us involved after we'd helped her, because she wanted to be the only one to suffer this misfortune. That's how it looked, and it hurt. I handed my supermarket bag over to Satoko, and then I noticed the back of Satoko's hand. There was something that looked like a bruise.
おい、サトコ、このあざ、どうしたんだよ。
I knew as much as anyone else how transparent that sounded. Didn't need to hear it from Satoko to know how this bruise came to be.
階段で転んだ時にちょっと打っただけですのよ。気になさらないでくださいませ。
嘘だろ。
Coach nudged me in the back. Then he put his index finger to his mouth and chided me for being so loud.
本当にありがとうございましたですわ。では明日、学校でお会いできるといいですわね。
そんな話してないだろ。その手のあざはどうしたって聞いてるんだよ。
Casey, shut up! The evening glow finally got to a point where I could see the other concealed oval-shaped bruise and traces of swelling on her neck and her legs and the other places too.
階段から落ちたんですの。
The very moment my violent rampaging emotions were about to burst their way through my throat, I found my mouth being tightly clamped down on. Honestly, you shouldn't be so loud, Casey. Coach was pressing down my mouth from behind, wrapping me around tightly with his hands. Because of that, I couldn't say anything. I couldn't only groan, which I did. That was all I could do. I needed to expel all the magma stinging deep within me. Because otherwise I'd surely explode into a million pieces that very moment. I groaned. I groaned from my mouth from my whole body, while heat fell in drops from my eyes. I groaned and groaned and I groaned to the point of exhaustion. I wrung absolutely everything out of myself. Even having lost my voice, I was still wringing it all out.
気持ちはわかります。わかりますから、前原さん。今だけこらえてください。お願いですから。前原さん。
Endure it for nut? And then what, huh? What would happen to her, to Satoko? Her body and mind were wounded. She was being made to suffer like this? Can you not even let me howl in vain at it? Is that it, coach? Are we that powerless? So powerless we can't even fetching scream from the bottom of our hearts? You can't, because you'll make it worse. The voices of the Higurashi made me calm down. I didn't know how long it had been. Satoko abruptly gave a slight bow.
ありがとうございますですわ、ケイチさん。
サトコ。
今、ケイチさんが本当のニーニーみたいに見えました。私の本当のニーニーはいなくなってしまったけど、私にはケイチさんというニーニーがいてくれる。
そうだ。俺がお前のニーニーだ。お前が辛い時絶対に助けてやるから。ニーニーがサトコをきっと助けてやるからな。
Satoshi Hyojo, you fetching idiot. If not now, then when? Satoko, she's never been in more pain in her life. If her Nini doesn't save her now, then what will he? So why did you run away? Why did you abandon her? Why did you leave Satoko behind? You don't have any right to call yourself Satoko's Nini.
俺は逃げないからな。絶対に逃げない。サトシみたいに。
Shush.
お前を見捨てて逃げたりしない。
Stop. Too much.
絶対に。
Too much.
俺はお前を見捨てない。
Slip. Tears trickling down from Satoko's eyes. And then she narrowed her eyes into a smile.
さよなら、ニーニー。
Satoko took her right hand and awkwardly waved at me.
大丈夫ですわ。今のニーニーので、私、いっぱい力をもらいましたから、大丈夫。明日まで頑張れますから、大丈夫。だから、今日はさよならでございますわよ。
There's no way that I could say bye, see you tomorrow. Then from inside the house came a throaty, disgusting voice.
サトコ、はよ、カキも持ってこんかい。
さあ、ニーニー、早く行ってくださいませ。もう、私は大丈夫ですから、早く。
行きましょう。前原さん、これ以上は、かえってさとこちゃんに迷惑をかけます。
監督、ニーニーのお家は、ちょっと遠いんですの。申し訳ございませんが、送ってあげていただけます？
ええ、わかりました。
Coach grabbed me by the collar with a strength I couldn't have imagined him having, started dragging me away. And I, unable to oppose him, started getting further away from Satoko. She waved her hand at us, expression still dark, and disappeared. Through the back door. Coach got into the car first, and I turned around a narrow path and brought the passenger side door around to me, for me.
前原さんの気持ちは、痛いくらいにわかります。いえ、前原さん以上に。でも、今この場だけは、こらえてください。あなたの心は、確かに伝わりましたから。だから、こらえてください。でないと。
もう、わかってます。すみません。さっきはありがとうございました。
I meekly got into the passenger seat. The car accelerated quietly, and Satoko's house grew further and further away in the rearview mirror. We made a wide turn, then I couldn't see her house anymore.
え？あなたのお家、そんな遠くなんですか？学校の反対側じゃないですか。
I didn't bother to reply. I would have been hard pressed to give him an answer so why I was at Satoko's house. Coach didn't say anything more either. For a while, the two of us were silent. The only sounds were the gravel spraying over the road as we drove. I remember how Rena said things were different than last year. At times, she had Satoshi with her. Satoshi protected Satoko. So that less of the sparks fell on her.
でも今はサトシはいない。
はい、残酷ですが、それが事実です。
Coach seemed to understand what I really meant when I said that.
悲しく、あまりに残酷な話ですが、
No, it's not a story, it's life.
私たちの決意や努力、尽力には限界があります。
It sounded like an excuse, but he was right. Even if Coach and I wanted to be people Satoko could depend on, that's all. It ended at the front door. No matter how much I shouted, that I would be her Nini. No matter how much I shouted, I wouldn't abandon her. No matter how much Satoko called me Nini, I couldn't do any more than that.
サトシは一体どこに行っちまったんですか？
Right, Satoshi was another story. Her actual brother, Satoshi, he was in a position to protect her far, far better than we ever could. That was the cold, sad truth of massive gulf between Satoshi and us.
今頃、どこでどうしているんでしょう。
Satoshi left home. I didn't know why. Maybe it was because of Oyashiro-sama's curse, or he disappeared or something. In any case, he wasn't beside Satoko now. At the time Satoko needed him to protect her most, he wasn't there.
どうして今ここにいないんですか？一番守ってやらなければならないこの時に。
お社様のたたりがどうとかいろいろ言われてますが、家出したとしか言えません。
ある日を境に帰ってこないって仲間が言ってました。妹のサトコに書き置き一つ残さずに家出を。
サトシ君はコツコツとアルバイトをしてたんです。サトコちゃんが当時とても大きなぬいぐるみを欲しがってましてね。結構いい値段らしくて、そのためにアルバイトをいろいろとしていたらしいんです。妹思いの兄でしたからね。おじ夫婦のもとで不憫な生活を強いられている妹に少しでも立派な誕生日プレゼントを贈ろうとしているんじゃないかってみんな囁き合っていました。
In the end, he didn't use his savings for birthday present for Satoko.
サトシ君がいなくなり、警察がいろいろと調べたら、サトシ君の貯金が当日すべて本人によって下ろされていることが分かりました。方々をいろいろと調べた結果、その貯金を資金に東京の方に行ったんではないかということになりました。
東京？何しに？
家出としか言いようがないじゃないですか。
自分が逃げ出すための資金をコツコツと貯めて、そこまでは勝手ですよ。でもサトコを置いてくことはないじゃないですか。同じ家出するならサトコも連れて行くべきだった。
Even now, Coach was still calm. He wasn't trying to pour any oil on the fire of my anger at all. He just waited until my anger naturally subsided. After listening, the gravel began to crunch under the wheels for a little while. Coach spoke abruptly.
察してください。置いていかれたサトコちゃんも同じ考えに至ったんです。
I'm a burden on my brother, and that's why he abandoned me. He didn't take her with him when he left. How terrible must Satoko have felt, being betrayed by the brother she loved so much.
でも、サトコちゃんはとても強い人でした。もちろん、親しい友人たちの支えもあってのことでしたが、ああして笑顔を取り戻すことができました。
I recalled how Satoko had spoken of Satoshi so brightly when she was eating dinner with her and Rika-chan a few days ago. At the time, I didn't think any more about how pleasant their sibling love had been. But now that I did think about it, I realized it was like she was peering into the distance from atop a pile of tragic perseverance.
サトシ君はきっと帰ってくる。その時までにお荷物じゃなくなった自分を見てほしいって。
Oh gosh.
サトコはお荷物なんかじゃないですよ。あいつ俺なんかよりよっぽど生活力はあるし、大抵のことは何だってできる。そりゃレナやリカちゃんなんかと比べれば劣る点はたくさんあるかもしれないけど、そこいらのやつよりよっぽど一人前ですよ。
サトシ君がいつ帰ってきてもいいように、そういう風になれるよう努力した結果です。涙ぐましい努力があったんですよ。
While still living with Rika-chan. With Rika-chan taught her how to handle everything flawlessly. Also, she could welcome back Satoshi at any time, so that she could show him that she wasn't ashamed.
で、そのサトシはいつ帰ってくるんですか？
I asked Coach, but he knew I wouldn't be able to answer. In any case, Satoshi ran away. He left Satoko and ran away from Hinamizawa. Someone said that when you leave Hinamizawa and run away, Oyashiro-sama's curse would get you, right? Then that makes sense. Satoshi running away and his disappearance, that would obviously mean people thought that it was the curse, right? And they could smile, as though that it were his own fault, as though he got what he deserved. Hey, Oyashiro-sama, whoever you are, Satoshi didn't vanish because he ran away. You demoned him away with your curse, didn't you? If that's not what happened, then I won't forgive you.
サトシはいつ頃？
去年のWatanagashiのお祭りの夜、おばが異常者に殺されて、その数日後の里子ちゃんの誕生日にです。
Fetch! Her birthday's on Watanagashi?
サトコの誕生日に？
Bang! I slammed my hand to the dashboard in front of me with all my might. Satoshi. Of all the days, he could have chosen to run away. Their aunt just died a few days before, didn't she? All your days of suffering were about to end, weren't they? You were just about to start thinking about a new life, weren't you? It was wrong to be happy about someone dying, but for Satoko and her brother, her birthday had come at the critical turning point. Their mean uncle had fled town, their siblings would be left alone. They should have been able to be happy about that. On Satoko's birthday. Satoko was probably waiting for her brother to return the whole time. Waiting for her brother to return when he never did. Oh, she was waiting for the stuffed animal that she'd wanted. That everyone was convinced that he was saving up for with all his jobs. She must have assumed that he was going to come parading in with a giant stuffed animal and everything was going to be okay. Waiting with bated breath for her brother to return and hopes and dreams of a new life to come growing even larger. But no matter how long she waited, he didn't come back. He didn't even contact her. Satoko trembling in anticipation of a great present just when would she have to face the cold, terrible truth? Satoshi, you fetching idiot. Could feel my blood rising in my head and my anger at Satoshi. I was frustrated. I was aggravated. Couldn't forgive him. Satoshi so respected and adored her brother, and yet he so heartlessly betrayed her? Such a person wouldn't just come back. Now when he was most needed? Yes, no one would protect her. Not even her real brother Satoshi.
だから、あなたがニーニーだと認めてもらえて嬉しかったです。私も里子ちゃんの幸せを祈る一人ですが、社会的立場があり、日中は仕事をしている身です。私が里子ちゃんのために割いてあげられる時間は少ない。でもあなたは違います。学校で生活を共にし、里子ちゃんやサトシ君とも年はほとんど離れていない。あなたは自分ができることに限りがあると思っていますが、それでも私よりはずっと里子ちゃんに手を差し伸べられる場所にいるのです。
So yeah, sadly, ironically, the way he's thinking of Satoshi being way better position, Keiichi is in a better position than Airi.
だから私の分まで里子ちゃんの力になってあげてほしい。そう願っています。
そんなことは監督だって。
もちろん年季のある私だからこそできる助けだって同じようにあなたにしかできない助けだってあるということです。私たちは互いにそれを全うすべきだと申し上げたいのです。
Was that a little too complicated? Coach added that, but I shook my head in response. Which I heard him when I heard him say that he had job skills, it reminded me that he was an adult in a different position from all of us. Maybe I should ask him about it.
監督は法律とか詳しいですか？
いえ、平均的に疎いですが、何か。
I thought back to what I argued with Mion and the others about Satoko. Our children's arguments had only left us with the conclusions that we had to wait and see, but what would an adult think?
児童福祉法でしたっけ？児童の安全を確保するために緊急措置として親子を分離させるという方法があるそうです。
緊急措置？じゃあすぐに里子をおじの元から救い出せるということじゃないですか？
里子ちゃんがそれを望まないかもしれません。
That's so sadly true. Fetch, it sucks, but like people who are in abusive situations genuinely sometimes feel trapped or like they deserve it or that it's the right place for them or they're scared of what could happen to them if they did separate and it traps them.
虐待されている本人が避難を望まなければ弱いでしょうから。
サトコが望まない？どうして？
It's complicated. Coach didn't answer me. I didn't know why he didn't. It was clear as day that Satoko's uncle was being violent and treating her like a slave. So then why... I clamped down on my frenzied emotions and waited intently for Coach to answer. But he never did. It wasn't like he was pretending he hadn't heard me. If I had to say, it was more likely he wanted to explain but couldn't put it into the right words.
サトコちゃんは多分そういういじめに耐えるのを試練だと考えているかもしれません。
Dang.
試練？変な宗教じゃあるまいし。
ご存知と思いますが、サトシ君はサトコちゃんをずっとかばってきました。サトコちゃんもずっとサトシ君に頼ってきました。
Oh, does she see this as a way of like proving that she doesn't need her brother or won't be a burden on him by being able to shoulder the pain on her own?
甘えてきたと言うべきかもしれません。
I've had known for a while that Satoshi had always protected Satoko from their aunt and uncle. But that was his duty as an older brother, not something to worry about.
それがトラウマになったかもしれないんですよ。自分が兄にもたれかかりすぎたから、兄が自分を嫌ってしまったんではないか。
Because he'd probably taken the beatings for her. As for Satoko, the current situation was a retelling of the story for a little over a year ago. But this time, Satoshi wasn't here.
だから誰にも頼らずに自分の力だけで試練を乗り越えたい。そういう力を身につけなければサトシ君は帰ってこない。そういう考えになっていると私は考えます。
Now that you mentioned it, Satoko had never said a word about how hard it had been before. I figured she was being threatened not to talk about it, but...
みんなと相談して児童相談所とかに通報すべきかなんて話をしてました。
聞いてますよね。昨年も福祉士さんがサトコちゃんのところに行ってるのは。
はい、結局様子見で余計にいじめられたって話も。
Yeah.
あれ、サトコちゃんが自分で通報したらしいんです。で、その結果、余計いじめが水面下へ移行してエスカレートした。サトコちゃんに降りかかるいじめも増え、それをかばうサトシ君の負担も著しく増えた。
ひょっとしてサトコ、それ通報した自分の責任だなんて思ってるんじゃ。
She would. Coach nodded quietly.
多分サトコちゃんに通報の話をするととても嫌がるが、その必要はないと強がりを言うと思います。サトコちゃんに内緒で通報したとしても、福祉士に対して自分は虐待を受けていないと言い張るでしょうね。
Satoko always acts tough and doesn't readily admit defeat, so I could imagine that easily.
一応児童相談所には裁判所の許可も当事者の許可も一切不要で緊急措置ができる強い権限があるんだそうです。
Wow, that's interesting.
虐待が公然の事実ならサトコちゃんが否定しても身柄は強制的に保護されるでしょう。
So we have to make it known.
それはサトコちゃんにとっては負けを意味するものなのかもしれませんが。
But she wouldn't like that.
勝ち負けの問題じゃないですよ。サトコは現実に。
話を折りますが、身柄が保護されると養護院等の施設に送致されます。そうするとですね、そこで暮らすことになるので、ですから学区変更で転校にもなります。
転校は仕方ないです。それであいつが保護されるなら。
サトコちゃんはその辺の事情も知っています。だからますます保護を望みません。
Right.
どうして？
あの家でサトシ君の帰りを待つのがサトコちゃんの生きる理由だからですよ。兄に捨てられ廃人同然になりかけた少女が何に生きる理由を見出したか、あなたのでなくサトコちゃんの価値観で考えてあげてください。
Felt like I was trying to confuse me as a hard to understand roundabout way of talking so unique to adults. The point was that I couldn't do anything about Satoko wanting to stay in the house, and that I should watch until she gives in. In the end, no matter what I said, Coach himself was saying, to wait and see.
俺はわかりませんよ。
はい。
俺は本当に聡子が危ないと感じたら誰の意思も聞かずに通報します。その結果聡子は不快な思いをして最終的にはそれが聡子の幸せにつながると信じます。
It's funny. There's a part of me that really does agree with this. And one of the great shows that's like super old, but I watched it because my grandpa was a fan of it, and my dad also was a fan of it, and so I watched it with them sometimes, and I fell in love with the show so much I got my own set of the series. It's the MASH. One of the best shows I've ever seen. It's really interesting because it blends a lot of like comedy with a lot of tragedy because it takes place during a war, and they make time to like give proper reverence to a lot of the war stuff. There's a great episode that has a lot of humor in it too, but they get a kid who comes into the hospital. He's been shot, and he's been shot like bad enough that he could have been sent home, but he requested not because he wanted to stay and fight. And his determination was he wanted to earn a medal to impress a girl back home. Come to find out, the kid was 17, and he'd used his brother's birth certificate and used his brother's name to join the army, pretending he was 18 when he joined the army. He was 16, but he pretended he was 18 and looked old for his age, kind of story, because he wanted to go to war, prove himself, so that his girl would fall in love with him again. And at first the doctor is like, you know what, do whatever you want to do. Well, who am I to tell you how to live your life? But then a friend of his comes through, and he's been shot and dies on the operating table in his hands. Like, he's trying to save him, but he just dies like right in front of him, like his childhood friend. And the doctor goes and brings the military police and reveals the kid, like, hey, this is so and so, but his actual name is this. He's actually 17 and he shouldn't be here. And like, the guy's like, why are you doing this? And the doctor's like saying, like, life's too precious to let you just throw it away for no good reason. And the kid's like, I'll hate you for as long as I live. And the doctor smiles and responds, and I hope it's a good long hate. That's kind of what Keiichi's saying here, and that's what reminded me of that idea of, like, you know what, I'll be the villain of your story if it means you get to live and you don't have to suffer. And it's an interesting flip around. It's like was the doctor the villain in that story? No, not at all. He was a hero. But the kid wouldn't see it that way, and probably wouldn't see it that way for the rest of his life. But for the doctor, it was like, that's okay. Maybe Keiichi's thinking along the same lines. It just made me think of that powerfully. Coach turned to me, gaze fixed into my eyes. It was written all over his face. He was shocked at what such a young kid had said.
どうしてあなたはそこまで
Coach, no, rather normal adults might not have understood. So I taught him the creed and values I believe in.
聡子は俺の仲間だから。そして俺は聡子のニーニーだから。では理由は足りませんか？
I stared at him with a will strong enough to break steel as his eyes betrayed tiny bits of unrest.
いえ、足りないなんてことはありません。
We were silent for a little while until finally Coach said only that.
誓ったじゃないですか、俺たち。
すみません。
We didn't want to make her cry.
聡子を絶対に泣かせないって。
We made a vow on that day of the barbecue. I didn't think about it hard at all, but Coach and I had made a promise that we would never let Satoko cry. Coach gave a dry grin of regret, immediately apologizing for not remembering. One way or another, when he grinned like that, it made me think that his enthusiasm for saving Satoko was a tiny bit smaller than mine. He lightly hit the brakes, making a skidding noise, and my whole body suddenly fell forward.
ひょっとして前原さんのお家って前原屋敷が前原さんのお家だったんですね。
Maebar would live at the Maebar residence. Yeah, that's what I thought. So his dad is from Hinamizawa. I kind of started wondering about that, like why they moved here specifically. That would make sense. Before I knew it, I was almost at my house. All right. Well, let's see if we can save Satoko, huh? Betcha me. That sucks. That's heavy stuff. Case file 31. We're gonna read that and then we're gonna be done. Pain to see. No, plain to see. Okay. Review the new tip. Case 31. December 1st, 1981. Blank Prefecture Juvenile Ward Welfare Division Report. Do not review, do not duplicate. Case 31, November 20. Satoko Hyojo. Blank years old. Residence, Hinamizawa Village, Shishibon. Consultation circumstances. Anonymous telephone SOS of child abuse. Abuse situation. Anonymous claim that female child is suffering physical abuse by adopted parent or guardians. Family structure. Dot marks abusers. Adopted father, adopted mother, older brother, child in question. Note, in June 1980, the child's parents died in an accident. She was given to her uncle on her father's side, her father's younger brother. Child Consultation Center's response. On the day of the anonymous telephone consultation, the center called the child's school and asked of her situation. The next day, the welfare officer on duty visited the child's home and heard what they had to say. Both adopted parents agreed the center's coaching. Contacted anti-abuse network in the city. As part of the suggested coaching, a district welfare officer in the area began visiting for coaching at fixed intervals. The scrawled note below is stapled to the report. Related information from former officer Mr. W. Refer to 1977 document D2-3, number 44. Ask Chief Investigator F from the city's educational consultation offices. He is well informed about it. All right. I wish I could know right off the top of my head what those might be referencing to, but my mind's too jumbled right now to even think about it. So we're going to end things here. Like, we're going to have, like, the sultry sounds of driving car for the background here. So, yeah, well, that got grim and dark, and that was a long episode, but come on, I couldn't stop any of that. Probably should have, but at the same time, like, I just couldn't. So thank you so much for being patient with me, watching this whole thing, and yeah, let's work this out, huh? Like I said before, this might be the first time I'm actually on board with Watanagashi. Is there a way we could point the curse at somebody? Because if we could just point the curse at somebody, maybe that's our path forward, right? Like, maybe we try and make this a target of Watanagashi. And that's awful because it's so wrong, but like, it absolutely feels justified here in a weird way. And maybe that's the whole point of this. Maybe it's to make us be like, yes, we should absolutely ask for the curse to trigger. Just point it in the right direction, huh? Fix a problem that couldn't be fixed otherwise. Because isn't that what the Watanagashi Festival is ultimately supposed to be? Political motivation to eliminate problems that couldn't conventionally be removed? Yeah, I might be Team Watanagashi this chapter. That's crazy to feel. But I guess we'll think about that more in the coming days. Thank you so much for being here today. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope you're looking forward to next week's episode. And plus, we got plenty of other good stuff coming out this week, so hopefully you'll tune in for some of that. And there's a good backlog, too, if you want to watch some stuff. ReZero, Steins Gate, Love Love, tons of other good options. Karawa Sojo, really good stuff. So feel free to take a dive in if you have time and you want to watch some more stuff. But otherwise, look forward to seeing you around next time. So thank you, and until next video, you're watching me or happen to see me in next. I'll see you there.